3 million residents are living inside a ticking clock, and almost none of them understand what that means. Scientists do not say Tampa Bay might face a catastrophic hurricane. They say it is the single most exposed major metro area in the entire country. The shape of the land basically guarantees it. And yet, waterfront construction is accelerating. Billions in new development are going up right inside the flood path right now at this moment. So why is one of the country's fastest growing regions building deeper into a crisis it has known about for decades? Tampa Bay reads like a postcard. Mild water, breathtaking sunsets, endless stretches of shoreline that bring millions of visitors every year. But underneath that clean surface sits a geographic trap, one that has been quietly tightening for over 100 years. Start with the shape of the bay itself. Tampa Bay is not wide and open like the open Gulf. It is narrow, tapered, shaped like a giant natural funnel with one end pointing straight at the ocean. When a hurricane shoves water toward that opening, the bay does not spread it out. It squeezes it. The water has nowhere to move except forward and inward, picking up speed as it presses into that narrowing channel until it slams into land with a force that levels everything it touches. Then there is the depth, or the lack of it. Tampa Bay averages just 12 feet below the surface. That sounds fine until you understand what it means during surge. Deep water soaks up surge energy. Shallow water does not. It pushes that energy straight onto the shore. Think about pouring water onto a flat dinner plate and then tilting it slightly. Every drop runs off instantly. That is Tampa Bay in a storm. The ground itself adds to the problem. Large portions of the metro area sit right at or basically at sea level, not safely above it. Entire communities are built on land that barely clears the waterline on a quiet day. Stack 12 feet of surge on top of that. Add another 10 feet for a major storm. Then ask yourself where all that water ends up. The answer is everywhere. In 2010, Tampa Bay's own planning council ran the projections. The exercise was called Project Phoenix, and what it produced was staggering. A single Category 5 strike on Tampa Bay could collapse nearly 500,000 structures, pile up 41 million tons of wreckage, and kill more than 2,000 people. That was 15 years ago, before the population ballooned, before billions more in coastal development, before water levels climbed even further. Today, NOAA models estimate that a worst-case storm could destroy up to 1.5 million buildings and produce $175 billion in damage. To put that into perspective, that is more than the full annual economic output of most countries, wiped out by a single event. And it gets worse. The bridges connecting Tampa's hospitals to the rest of the city, the roads emergency crews would use to reach the injured, are projected to go underwater and become useless. Tampa General Hospital, sitting on Davis Islands, completely surrounded by water, could be totally cut off. The geography did not just put a city at risk. It built a city that was always one direct hit away from vanishing. But here's what nobody told you. The geography is only half the problem. The last time a major hurricane made a direct strike on Tampa Bay was 1921. Let that settle. Over 100 years back, before commercial air travel, before television, before the interstate highway system existed, Tampa in 1921 held roughly 50,000 people, small enough that a catastrophic storm, while devastating, was survivable at a population level. Today, more than 3 million people fill the Tampa Bay metro area. The city that absorbed that blow a century ago and the city sitting in the crosshairs right now are not even remotely the same place. But here is the dangerous part. The storm stopped. The city held. And somewhere in Tampa Bay's shared memory, that survival became a story people repeated across generations. Tampa does not get hit. We have always come through. It always turns before it reaches us. That is not meteorology. That is a myth. Scientists have a name for what repeated close calls do to the human mind: near-miss bias. When something almost occurs but does not, the brain does not process it as danger narrowly avoided. It registers it as confirmation of safety. Every hurricane that curved north at the last moment, every storm that lost strength before landfall, every season that passed without a direct strike, each one gradually reinforced the illusion. Not that Tampa had been fortunate, but that Tampa was somehow shielded. Mark Luther has watched this happen in real time. He is a marine science professor living in St. Petersburg, and he monitors the slow advance of bayou water as it inches closer to his low-lying street year after year. He understands precisely what a major hurricane tracking directly up Tampa Bay would do to his home, his block, his entire neighborhood. He says it without hesitation. A storm moving the right direction could completely submerge his house and most of the properties around him. He still lives there. Because what do you do with information that feels too enormous to act on? The real estate world never wrestled with that question. Developers looked at Tampa's century of near misses and saw an opportunity, not a warning. Beachfront parcels, waterfront condominiums, high-rise towers with unblocked bay views. The construction wave that followed was not built on honest risk accounting. It was built on 100 years of luck being quietly repackaged as 100 years of stability. Meanwhile, the oldest parts of Tampa were built during an era when rising sea levels was not even a concept engineers factored in. Infrastructure designed for a world that no longer exists now houses millions of people in a climate that is becoming something entirely different 100 years of quiet from the storm. But here's what nobody told you. That quiet was never a guarantee. Close your eyes and place yourself there. Not as some distant emergency scenario, as an actual night. The National Hurricane Center posts an update at 2 in the morning. The storm has fixed its path. It is heading straight up Tampa Bay. Forecasters project landfall in 18 hours. The surge estimate reads 22 feet. And the evacuation order, the one directing 3 million people to leave, goes out in the middle of the night while most of Tampa is asleep. 18 hours feels like enough time. It is not. Traffic projections for a full Tampa Bay evacuation show gridlock setting in within the first 2 hours. The highways out of the city, Interstate 75, Interstate 4, US Route 19, turn into parking lots as millions of people try to move at the same time. Research has shown that a complete evacuation of Tampa Bay's surge zones cannot happen inside a standard warning window. The numbers simply do not add up. The roads were not designed for it. The land does not allow it. Then the surge hits, not gradually, not like a slow tide you can watch from a safe distance. Storm surge moves like a barrier, fast, quiet in the seconds before contact, and then completely crushing. 22 feet of water is not something you push through. It is not something you survive by climbing to your second floor. 22 feet puts the roof of a normal 2-story house beneath the surface. It swallows road signs. It buries traffic signals. It erases entire neighborhoods in minutes. The wind is terrifying, but the water is what kills. Historically, storm surge is responsible for nearly half of all hurricane-related deaths in the United States. Not the wind, not the rain. The water that nobody outran because they waited too long or had nowhere to move or simply did not accept it would reach that level. Tampa General Hospital is located on Davis Islands, connected to the mainland by bridges that no AA projects will flood and fail during a major storm. The city's main trauma facility, serving the region's most critically ill patients, becomes unreachable. Backup power kicks in. Fuel supplies are limited. Relief teams cannot get through. The hospital that people would be rushing toward in a mass casualty event is exactly the one a major hurricane would isolate first. Power stations built at sea level go dark within hours. The grid fails across the region. Cell towers drop out. Emergency systems buckle. The 911 network, already overwhelmed, goes silent in the worst hit areas. Not strained, not delayed, silent. This is not guesswork. It is the output of no AA models, FEMA planning documents, and decade after decade of emergency management simulations. The disaster has been mapped in exhaustive detail. But here's what nobody told you. Knowing exactly how it unfolds has not stopped anyone from acting like it will not. The evacuation maps look orderly and logical on paper. Color-coded sectors, clean borders, clear routes toward higher ground. What those maps leave out is who actually lives inside them and why. For tens of thousands of Tampa Bay households, the instruction to simply leave is not an instruction. It is a mockery. Jessica Lopez lives in what Hillsborough County officially designates an emergency management hotspot. Her home is a mobile home. It floods during tropical storms, not hurricanes. Tropical storms. The weather events that barely make the news. Last summer, during one of those routine systems, the septic tank behind her house backed up and overflowed. She was 6 months pregnant. Her yard was covered in sewage. She could not go outside. She could not leave. She stayed because she had no option. In a Category 3 hurricane, NOAA models show her neighborhood going completely underwater. She knows this. She is still there because leaving requires money she does not have. Evacuation means fuel costs, motel stays, food, days away from work at a job that does not offer emergency pay. For Jessica and thousands of families like hers across Tampa Bay, the financial wall blocking evacuation is just as solid as any flooded road. The evacuation zone is not a line on a map for those families. It is the place they are permanently stuck in. Mobile homes offer nearly zero structural protection even in a weak system. In a direct Category 5 hit, they do not shelter people. They become wreckage. And Tampa Bay holds one of the highest concentrations of mobile home communities in the state, many of them sitting directly inside the highest risk surge areas. Then there is the older population. Tampa Bay has one of the oldest age profiles of any major metro in the country. There are hundreds of thousands of senior residents who depend on medical equipment, who cannot drive, and who need outside help to relocate. Many live in communities where organized evacuation support is underfunded and short-staffed. During Hurricane Katrina, the deaths were not spread evenly across the population. They gathered precisely among the elderly, the poor, and those who could not move on their own. The people every evacuation plan quietly assumes will be handled by someone else. Nobody is handling it. When the storm comes, the people with vehicles, money, and flexibility will go. The people without those things will stay. And the surge does not look at your income before it moves. But here's what nobody told you. The people most likely to be left behind are the same people the city has already left behind every other day of the year. Here is something that should stop you completely. Tampa Bay already knows, not suspects, not worries about, knows. The research exists. The simulations have been completed. The surge maps are published and publicly accessible. City planners, emergency managers, and elected officials have reviewed data showing in precise detail what a direct hurricane strike would do to this region. The knowledge is not the gap. What came next is, while scientists were issuing warnings and models were running projections, and emergency managers were conducting evacuation drills that consistently collapsed on paper, Tampa's coastline was being reshaped into one of the most aggressively built urban shorelines in the country. New sports arenas, luxury towers with unblocked bay views, marketed as the peak Florida lifestyle. Commercial developments pushed right to the water's edge, constructed on land that surge maps mark in the deepest, most dangerous red. The development did not happen despite the warnings. It happened alongside them, simultaneously, in full view of everyone who was supposed to be watching. Maya Burke sits on Tampa Bay's Planning Council. She does not dismiss the risk. She says that overcoming climate complacency is genuinely hard because the danger does not register as urgent in the day-to-day way that moves human behavior. There is a tendency, she says, to assume action can come later. But the financial industry has already determined there is no later. Major insurance companies have been quietly withdrawing from Florida for years, not because the storms have not arrived yet, but because the actuarial math on what is ahead has already been run, and the figures do not hold. State Farm, Allstate, and multiple other large carriers have reduced or completely dropped their Florida residential coverage. The companies still writing policies have raised premiums to levels pricing working families out of coverage entirely. The private market is communicating something in the clearest terms it knows. This risk cannot be insured at a price people can afford. The market is pulling back. The city is still building. That contradiction is not an accident. Property tax income from waterfront development funds city services. Tourism tied to that shoreline drives the local economy. The political motivation to keep building is massive. The political cost of limiting construction in a surge zone, of telling landowners their properties cannot be built on, of telling investors their projects cannot move forward, is one that almost no elected official in Tampa Bay has been willing to absorb. So the towers go up, the tourism campaigns run, the waterfront fills in, and every new structure that rises inside the surge zone is one more building that will need to be rescued, rebuilt, or written off when the storm finally tracks that way. But here's what nobody told you. The city is not ignoring the risk. It is shifting it onto everyone else. Everything described so far assumes the storm Tampa Bay fears will behave like the storms of the past. It will not. The Gulf of Mexico is running hot. Water surface temperatures across the Gulf have broken records in recent years, reaching levels that climate scientists describe not as a warm phase, but as a permanent change in the ocean's baseline condition. That difference matters enormously because hurricanes are not powered by wind. They run on heat. Warm water is the fuel. The warmer the ocean, the more powerful the storm, the faster it builds strength, and the more moisture it carries inland when it makes landfall. What that means for Tampa Bay is not theoretical, it is basic math. A hurricane forming over the Gulf today draws on more energy than the same storm would have had 3 decades ago. Scientists have recorded a sharp rise in what they call rapid intensification, storms that climb from Category 1 to Category 4 in under 24 hours. That compression of intensity into a shorter timeline is not just alarming on a weather chart, it is ruinous for evacuation planning. Tampa Bay's evacuation models already break down with an 18-hour window. Rapid intensification can cut that window in half. A storm that appears manageable on a Tuesday morning can be unsurvivable by Tuesday evening. Sea level rise multiplies every number in the equation. Tampa Bay's water level has already climbed measurably compared to just decades back. That baseline increase means surge no longer starts from zero. It starts from higher up. A surge that would have reached 10 feet above land in 1970 reaches 12 feet today with the same storm behind it. By mid-century, under moderate climate projections, that number climbs further. The flood zone expands. More homes fall inside it. More people are in the path. And the storms delivering that surge are growing stronger while the land they are striking sits lower. Climate models that once placed these conditions in the distant future keep getting revised, not pushed forward, pulled back. Events projected for 2060 are showing up in 2024. The pace is outrunning the predictions, and the predictions were already alarming. The Gulf is not cooling back to 20th century temperatures. The storms forming over it are not returning to historical norms. The direction is fixed. The only remaining variable is timing. Which storm, which season, which year finally tracks directly up Tampa Bay's tapered coastline with a full surge load behind it. Not if, not maybe, when, but here's what nobody told you. The question of when carries a more uncomfortable answer than most Tampa Bay residents are prepared to face. Florida has revised its evacuation zones. Officials will point out the system has improved, and compared to 20 years ago, that is accurate. Warning systems are sharper. Surge modeling is more refined. Public communication networks are more developed. On paper, Tampa Bay's emergency readiness looks like forward progress. Then you check what the simulations actually produce when a full evacuation drill is run. Not a success, not even close. Emergency management exercises across Tampa Bay have consistently returned the same outcome. A complete departure from the highest risk surge zones inside the window a major hurricane allows is logistically impossible given the current road network, current population density, and current public compliance rates. People wait too long. Roads fill too fast. The most exposed residents, those without cars, without savings, without anywhere to go, do not move at all. The drill ends the same way every time. People still inside the surge zone when the water reaches them. Officials know this. The reports are not sealed. They sit in county emergency management databases as publicly accessible documents that almost nobody reads. Tampa Bay has invested in early alert systems, and those investments are real. The National Hurricane Center's track accuracy has improved dramatically over the past 20 years. Surge models are more precise than ever before, but a perfect warning given to someone with no capacity to respond is not a solution. It is better documentation of a preventable tragedy. The structural changes that would actually shift the outcome. Limiting new construction inside surge zones, funding coordinated evacuation support for car-free households, moving critical infrastructure like power stations away from sea level, strengthening bridge access to Tampa General Hospital. Those remain mostly underfunded, politically blocked, or simply never started. Maya Burke and planners like her keep pressing the case. Act now, not after the storm. The cost of retrofitting after a catastrophe runs 10 times higher than the cost of prevention before one. Mark Luther walks out each morning to pick up his paper. He watches dolphins move through the bayou. He sees the roseate spoonbills wading along the waterline. He admits it himself. The beauty of it makes you forget. Makes you push aside the full weight of what one storm on one particular heading would do to everything visible from that front step. That is not denial. That is what it looks like to exist inside an impossible situation and still choose to stay present in it. But the storm does not respond to beauty. It does not factor in the life people have constructed here. It does not negotiate. It is coming, and Tampa Bay is simply not prepared. Tampa Bay is not a story about a single city making a single poor decision. It is a story about what happens when people are highly capable of living inside the present and deeply incapable of preparing for a future they can see approaching but cannot quite force themselves to accept. Tampa Bay has the research, it has the models, it has the scientists, the planners, the emergency managers, and the flood maps. It has a planning council member in rooms telling elected officials that the window is now. It has a marine science professor watching the water climb in his backyard year after year. It has families like Jessica Lopez already flooding in tropical storms, already trapped, already aware that a direct hurricane would erase everything they have built. The information is not absent. The will to act on it is, and Tampa Bay is not singular in that failure. It is simply the sharpest version of it. Coastal cities across the United States are running the same quiet, ongoing calculation that the price of preparing today is too visible, too politically painful, too economically disruptive, while the cost of the disaster itself remains safely abstract, something that will happen eventually to someone in some future that never quite arrives, until suddenly it does. The storms are not waiting for the politics to sort themselves out. The Gulf is warming. The storms are intensifying faster than the models anticipated. The surge zones are widening as baseline water levels creep upward. Every season that passes without a direct strike on Tampa Bay is not evidence the danger was overstated. It is one fewer season standing between 3 million people and the moment their luck finally ends. Mark Luther still walks out every morning. He still watches the dolphins. He still lives inside the beauty of a place he knows is borrowed time. Jessica Lopez is still in her mobile home inside the surge zone, still one tropical storm from a flooded yard, still unable to leave. The waterfront towers are still going up. The insurance companies are still pulling out. The evacuation drills are still failing on paper. Nothing has changed, and everything is accelerating faster than the projections said it would. Tampa Bay's silent catastrophe is not approaching. It is already moving. In the rising water levels, in the insufficient roads, in the families with nowhere to go. The only question remaining is whether the storm arrives before the city finally decides to treat it seriously.